And I am, like, again, really sorry for how I did conduct myself. I mean, obviously, I'm apologizing to Melanie here. And seeing that just makes me feel like really bad because it looks really bad and because it was really bad.
With Sincere and Melanie, there was something I kept noticing, not only what Sincere said, but what he never said. And once you notice what is missing, it changes how you understand the entire interaction. And when we look at Casey and Aniya, we see something very different. Because movie night is not only about what gets revealed on the screen, it is about what happens after the clip plays. When someone has to face the impact of what they said, what they did, or how they tried to explain it away. They may know the cameras are there, but sometimes they make choices as if no one is watching. But movie night changes that. It brings those hidden moments into the relationship. And for me, the real question is not only what did they do? The real question is, what do they do now that they have been exposed? Do they take responsibility? Do they minimize? Do they get defensive? Do they turn the focus on their own embarrassment? Or can they actually turn toward the person that they hurt? That is why movie night is so revealing. So let's start with Sincere and Melanie. On movie night, Sincere's behavior with the other women was shown in front of Melanie, as you know. And now we get to see the part that matters most for this conversation. How does Sincere respond once he has been exposed?
Mama happy.
So am I. Everyone already knows what happened and how that went down. Yeah, I was exploring soul, and I think now everyone knows that I tend to just like say it a lot and really means a little bit.
I'm not completely sure what Sincere means when he says a lot and it means a little bit. But what I hear in that statement is almost an acknowledgement of don't fully trust my words. Because if you are telling someone, sometimes I say things and they don't really mean that much, then the natural question becomes, how is Melanie supposed to know which words matter and which words don't? In a relationship, words and of course actions have to align to help create safety. They help someone understand where they stand with you. So when someone says a lot but then later says it didn't mean that much, it can leave the other person questioning the whole connection. It is not only about the kiss. It is about the confusion that gets created when someone's words feel meaningful in the moment, but then get minimized later.
But again, like in that moment when I was exploring soul, like sure, I did want to get to know her and explore. And I might have did a little bit too much for sure. But at the end of the day, like I know like where I want it to be and the choice I wanted to make.
The problem with how Sincere begins to address being exposed is that he is not really talking about how this impacted Melanie. He says, I might have done a little bit too much, but even that minimizes what happened. It makes the behavior sound small, almost like he is saying, maybe I got a little carried away, instead of really naming the impact of what Melanie just saw. And this connects to what I said in my previous video about Sincere. I think Sincere sees himself as honest because he will admit to certain facts. He can say, yes, I kissed soul, but honesty is not only admitting the fact that can't be denied. Honesty also means being willing to face the emotional truth of what happened. It means recognizing, I did this and I can see why that hurt you. But he is also softening it. He is reducing the impact. And that is where minimization can look like accountability, but it does not feel like accountability to the person who was hurt. And then Sincere says basically that he was always going to choose Melanie. But here is the question. Does he ever consider that if Melanie had known fully what happened, she may not have wanted to choose him? Because that is part of why minimizing is so important. When someone downplays what happened, they are not only protecting themselves from accountability, they are also protecting themselves from what the other person might choose if they fully understood the whole truth. And so, in essence, they are limiting that person's ability to make an informed choice about the relationship. And I understand Melanie did find some things out and she continued to stay with him, but she was still hidden from the entire truth. In relationships, repair is not just saying, but I choose you in the end. Repair means being honest enough to let the other person respond to the full truth, not the softened version of it.
Let's kiss in the speakeasy.
Coming from a vulnerable place. Yeah, we did kiss in the speakeasy, but it wasn't like nothing crazy. Like it was just a kiss.
So that's what I'm trying to say. That was right after he was with Soul, and that's how he minimizes it. He says it was nothing crazy, just a kiss. But that is the problem. When someone says just a kiss, they are usually describing the action from their own point of view. They are not describing the impact from the other person's point of view. And even with that, he is still not telling her the whole story. Because to Melanie, it may not feel like just a kiss. It may feel like you were saying things to me that made me feel chosen, and then I had to watch you create intimacy with someone else. So even if Sincere experiences it as small, Melanie may not experience it that way. She might experience it as confusing, embarrassing, and painful. And that is where minimization gets in the way of repair. Because repair cannot happen when one person is saying, it wasn't that big of a deal, while the other person is sitting there feeling the impact of it.
Sometimes Sincere is just not honest. I'm tired of hearing, no, he chose you. Seriously, being chosen is not a prize. Just because you come back to someone after doing what you do doesn't make us surprised to be chosen. I would rather be respected. I would rather be told the truth.
And this is where we see Melanie's confusion, because Sincere has minimized his actions. So when he says, I'm sorry, unfortunately those words fall flat here. Not because an apology does not matter, but because he is not really acknowledging the impact on Melanie. That is what is required for a true apology. He is apologizing, but he is not fully acknowledging what she is going through. He has not said, I understand that watching that may have made you question whether my words to you were real, whether you could trust me, and whether I was considering your heart at all. But this is why Melanie seems so confused, because when someone minimizes the behavior and then quickly says, I'm sorry, the person is left trying to figure out, are you sorry because you understand the hurt, or are you sorry because you got exposed?
Hey, but what I would say, here in this villa, I've learned so much about myself, and the time that I spent in Casa with Amor, like no shake, Amor, like you're amazing. But again, it was still Melanie's home.
Well, it may be true that Sincere has learned a lot about himself, but in that moment, that does not address Melanie's pain, because Melanie is not sitting there needing to know that this experience helped him grow. She is sitting there needing him to understand what it felt like for her to watch all that she watched. And if anything, saying, I learned so much about myself can feel infuriating when the learning came at the cost of hurting someone else. Because from Melanie's side, it can sound like, I used this experience to figure myself out, but you were the one who had to carry the pain of it. That does not mean his growth is meaningless. It means his growth cannot replace accountability. Before he talks about what he has learned, he has to acknowledge what it cost her.
Let her Casa, she was good.
I'm gonna believe you pick me until you fix it.
Well, Melanie wants him to fix it, and I understand that, but what I think she would need to do is say more about what fixing it would actually look like for her. Because fix it can mean a lot of different things. She may mean repair how you hurt me. She may mean show me that you understand the impact. She may mean I need you to grow and change. She may mean I need to know that I can trust your words moving forward. And this is important because Melanie has stayed in this relationship even after discovering more than once that Sincere was not completely truthful with her. So now the question becomes, what would she need to happen in order for her to feel emotionally safe again? So when Melanie says she wants him to fix it, I think the deeper question is, what would actually rebuild trust for her? And obviously Melanie has her own growth work to do. She needs to explore why she continues to accept half-truths and be in a relationship with someone who minimizes her pain and doesn't really acknowledge it in a way that actually would create repair and build trust.
You would ask me why I would do the things I do, and I'm going to be really vulnerable when I say this. I was when I was younger. of just like always wanting to be a people pleaser, always wanted to cater to other people's emotions, has bled into my adulthood because I'm the first person, I don't want to let anybody down, but here I am letting down the person that I value the most.
Sincere also says that he genuinely does not want to make Melanie feel that pain again. I didn't show you that. And I do hear something real in that. So let's break down his vulnerable sharing. It may have felt vulnerable for Sincere to say that he was a people pleaser as a child, that he learned to cater to other people's emotions, and that he is still doing that as an adult. That may be a meaningful realization for him, but here is the challenge. He is still not directly addressing how he hurt Melanie, because real vulnerability in this moment would not only be, here is why I struggle. Real vulnerability would also be, here is how my struggle impacts you. He would need to connect people-pleasing to the actual behavior. Did people-pleasing make him say things to Soul that he didn't fully mean? Did people-pleasing mean he avoided being fully honest with Melanie because he did not want to deal with her hurt? Sincere may genuinely not want to hurt Melanie again, but Melanie would need more than that. She would need someone to understand what he's going to do differently when he feels that pull to please, avoid, soften, or minimize. Otherwise, the vulnerable sharing can start to feel like, please understand why I did this, instead of, I understand what this did to you.
What about you and Soul was people pleasing?
Whole experience, with me and Soul, it wasn't even about people pleasing. It was about kind of me just flat out, that was just disrespect.
So he does acknowledge that was not people-pleasing. He says that he was being disrespectful, and I do think that that's important because he is naming the behavior more honestly here. But again, do you see what is still missing? And that is what is most important. That is what I was talking about in the beginning of the video. He may feel regret, he may feel bad, he may even feel ashamed of how he acted. But do you see what is missing? Empathy is still missing. And this is where people can sometimes confuse regret with empathy, but they are not the same thing. Regret says, I feel bad that I did that. I feel bad that I hurt you. Empathy is not just understanding intellectually how you have hurt someone. Empathy is remembering and feeling the pain itself. It is so important because so many people struggle to fully understand what an empathetic response actually looks like. So, for example, if Melanie feels betrayed, hurt, scared, or unsure of what was real, Sincere does not need to have had that same experience to empathize with her. He needs to connect with the feeling. He might ask himself, when have I felt betrayed, hurt, scared? When have I wondered whether I could trust someone's words? The experience may be completely different, but the feeling becomes the bridge. Empathy is the moment of recognizing, I know this feeling. I know how painful it can be. Empathy is not about having the same experience. It is about connecting to the feeling. That is how we step into empathy, because then you know what the other person is feeling. It does not mean he makes the moment about himself. It means he uses his own emotional memory to understand her pain more deeply. And from that place, he can respond to Melanie not just with regret, but with real emotional understanding. Regret can be very focused on the person who caused the hurt. Sincere. They feel guilty. They feel embarrassed. They feel disappointed in themselves. But empathy turns it towards the person who was hurt and connects with the feeling. I know what it feels like to be hurt. For repair to happen, Melanie would need him to move beyond I feel bad about what I did and into I understand how my choices impacted you. And certainly leaning into empathy and really knowing the feeling that you caused another person to experience is tremendously vulnerable, and shame often blocks that, because when you really have a deepened understanding of what you made someone else feel, that is so hard to communicate to another person, because when you're vulnerable and you're carrying shame perhaps at the same time, you don't know how the other person is going to react, and that can be a scary place to be in, but a necessary one for repair to occur. Okay, let's move on to Casey and Aniya. So Aniya saw and heard what Casey said during Casa Amor, but this is also a relationship where both people had been carrying hurt, as I talked about in my video about Casey and Aniya. So now we get to watch what happens when both of them enter into this conversation carrying that hurt. They may start out a bit like Sincere and Melanie did when trying to repair, but in the end, they did it very differently. And that is why this comparison is so important.
I ain't that shit.
Oh.
As soon as
What I will say is that I'm sorry again.
I don't want to hear it.
I understand you don't want to hear it,
It's
but I'm
good,
I'm
bro.
gonna say it.
You're good, bro.
I was
You're good.
look. Let me talk. That was like looking at everything like that. Like I can't really make much excuses.
Well, Aniya likely doesn't want to hear I'm sorry because likely it feels like just words. But I do think that Casey felt humiliated and ashamed to see himself like that. That I think was very real. But again, what is missing is how that must have felt to Aniya. Because an apology cannot only come from a place of I feel bad seeing myself that way. It also has to include I understand what it was like for you to see and hear that. So next, let's talk about how things escalated between the two of them.
If I go up to you and you have all these people for you, she has nobody for her.
It's a 3-second conversation. You're standing up there. You're standing up like you're noble or big and proud.
All right, bro. All right, bro. All right, bro.
I ran over and what did you do? You stood up there and you fought.
All of them are very angry in this moment, and then Casey stands up, which intensifies the dynamic even more. Now, should Aniya have gotten in his face like that? Absolutely not. And I know she does apologize to him, and I will talk about that soon. But this kind of escalation can happen with couples. I see this in my office when I'm working with couples in a counseling session. Both people are feeling intense emotions, and those emotions start driving the conversation. So in this example, Aniya is feeling likely humiliated, hurt, betrayed, and probably a whole lot more. And KC is feeling humiliated, embarrassed, and likely shame. And when both people are flooded like that with such intense emotions, it becomes very difficult to pause, listen, and actually hear each other. Each person is reacting from their own pain, and the conversation can quickly become about the protection of themselves instead of understanding. That is when a couple often need to take a break, not to avoid the conversation, but to let the emotions settle down enough so that they can return with more openness and clarity and hopefully have a better chance of actually hearing each other.
And then it's like scary because it's like seeing myself like that. Yeah, like, I did not like that. Like I didn't like seeing, because that is me.
To Casey's credit, as he processes this with TT, he is not avoiding accountability. He is acknowledging that he did not like what he saw in himself. Accountability often begins with being able to look at yourself honestly and then say, that is not who I want to be. I also cannot imagine what it must have felt like to watch your worst moments played back in front of everyone and on national television. That would be humiliating for anyone. It would be painful. It would probably bring up a lot of shame, like I said. And when TT hugs him after he shares his vulnerability, I love that she did that because in that moment she is not excusing what he did, but she is offering care while he is facing himself. And that is so important because people often need enough emotional safety to stay open to accountability. If the shame becomes too overwhelming, they may shut down, defend, or run from the impact that the shame is having on them. But when someone can feel supported while still being accountable, they may have a better chance of actually growing from what they are seeing.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Casey, I genuinely want to say I'm sorry for standing up in your face. That was really disrespectful and you do not deserve that. I know I'm genuinely so sorry. That was very out of character and that's not me.
Well, I'm sorry for also standing up in front of your face too. I didn't mean it for like you guys to get upset or anything, but like I just felt like I wasn't
being heard. And I 100% understand that. Sorry, I just want that to be said. So sorry.
Given that Aniya had not yet received the repair from KC in the way that she likely needs, I think it was really big of her to come back and apologize for her behavior. She acknowledged him directly when she said you did not deserve that, and she also agreed that he did not feel heard, and that was huge. And I think it was admirable because even though Aniya was still hurt, she was able to step outside of her own pain long enough to recognize the impact that she had on KC. That is not an easy thing to do when you are still feeling wounded yourself. And I also like that when Aniya walked away, I didn't show you this, but the men acknowledged that what she did was vulnerable and mature, because it was. She took ownership without needing KC to repair everything first, and that showed emotional maturity. That is one of the hardest parts of repair, being able to acknowledge the impact that you have had on someone else, even when you are still wanting them to acknowledge the impact that they've had on you.
So I said a lot of bullshit in there.
Yeah.
I said a lot of shit that like I was embarrassed of, and you know, I think even watching it, like I kind of like curled in a ball because I just cringed at most of the shit I was saying.
One thing that I want to point out is that KC is not really looking at Aniya when he acknowledges his behavior, and that is likely because he feels very vulnerable. And I feel pretty sure that he is likely feeling shame, obviously embarrassment, and discomfort as he tries to face what he did.
I think I was holding so much shit in because I didn't want to keep arguing. And in due time, the shit kind of blew up to the point where I'm just saying shit because I think I built up resentment that you didn't even know about.
Let me say this, resentment that builds up in one person and their partner doesn't know about is one of the most toxic things that can happen in a relationship. In my last video, I talked about how I thought KC was holding resentment toward Aniya, so the fact that he acknowledges that here and says that she did not even know about it is actually very validating. Because even if he was not saying it directly to her that he had been carrying resentment, she may have felt that on some level when she was with him. Sometimes people can feel resentment from their partner even before it is brought out and acknowledged openly and to each other. They can feel the distance, the tension, or the lack of softness. And I want to be clear, I am not suggesting that Aniya did not bring her own challenges into the relationship. I do think that there were things that she was struggling with too. But KC is addressing a very important piece of their dynamic here. Because when someone is carrying resentment that the other person does not even know about, it can shape the whole relationship. It can affect how soft they are, how reassuring they are, how patient they are, and how emotionally safe the connection feels. So when KC says that he was holding resentment, it helps explain why Aniya may have felt insecure or unsettled in the relationship. I am not suggesting that this is the only reason that she may have felt unsettled in that relationship, but it is likely one piece, along with things that she may have been carrying from her own history.
You know, my feelings for you weren't fake. I don't want you to feel like, you know, you were a safe option. I don't want to feel like you thought I was lying to you. We did have really bright moments. We had some bullshit.
Yeah, we had some bullshit. But
That
we had
bullshit was
bright
at the
moments.
end, but we had really bright moments, and that really is like dear to my heart. I really feel those feelings.
I want to acknowledge what KC is doing well here. First, he takes ownership for his actions. He is not avoiding what he did, and he is able to name his behavior, and that is a huge impact. And then he gives Aniya reassurance that he did have feelings for her. I think that is so important because part of Aniya's pain may have been wondering, was any of this real for you? So when KC reassures her that he did have feelings, he is speaking to that specific hurt and her confusion. And then he says this.
But you can still hate me. You can still be mad at me. You can still feel how you feel because I understand. Sorry.
When KC says, you can still hate me, I actually hear that as a subtle form of empathy and compassion because he is giving Aniya a room to feel whatever she feels. He is not demanding that she forgive him quickly, soften toward him, or reassure him that everything is okay. In that moment, he seems to understand that her anger and hurt make sense. And that is huge because sometimes repair begins with the person who caused the hurt being able to tolerate the other person still feeling hurt and not trying to rush them out of their feelings.
I forgive you. I want you to know, like, I really do care about you. It was hard to see it, but I'm glad that you were just like, okay,
Yeah.
it was bad. And like that you are sorry.
It was a mirror for sure.
You know, to be forgiven is a powerful thing, and it feels terrible to not be forgiven. And Aniya was able to get there in part because she does seem like a person who wants to forgive. She seems like someone who wants to understand, reconnect, and move forward if she can. But I also want to acknowledge that KC did an excellent job of providing repair to her in this moment. He did not just ask for forgiveness, He gave her something to respond to. He took ownership. He acknowledged the resentment that he had been carrying. He reassured her that his feelings were real, and he gave her room to still be hurt. And I think that is why forgiveness could happen here. It was not just Aniya choosing to let it go. It was KC helping to create enough emotional safety for her to soften.
Yeah, honestly, I respect your apology so much. And I'm so over arguing and
I'm
like
over it
doing
too.
it too. Like, I want you to be happy, Casey, genuinely. Like, I really want you to know that you deserve to be happy.
There is such an important lesson here. Casey gave something meaningful to Aniya through the repair that he provided. And because he gave her that repair, it allowed her to get to a space where she could give something meaningful back to him. And it was not only forgiveness. When Aniya tells Casey that she wants him to be happy and that he deserves to be happy, that is incredibly meaningful, because she is not only saying, I forgive you, she is saying, even though I was hurt, I still see your humanity. I still want good things for you. And Casey may not realize it, but when Aniya responds with that much grace, he can internalize something very powerful. Vulnerability can be met with care. Vulnerability can be safe, and vulnerability can be rewarded with connection instead of rejection. And that is such an important relationship lesson, because when repair is done well, it does not just help the person who was hurt, it can also help the person who caused the hurt learn that facing themselves honestly does not have to destroy connection. Sometimes it is what allows the connection to become more honest, more tender, and more real.
I'm happy you're Carl. I feel like that's a great thing for you. I feel like you guys complement each other very well.
And then just treat TT, right?
Yeah, no, I will, bro. I will, bro.
So we good?
We're good.
Okay.
That chokes me up, because it's just so nice to see two people be able to repair and come together. And Casey gives even more back to Aniya by wishing her well with Carl. You can see it in Casey's face. He seems grateful for Aniya's response to him, and maybe even a little surprised by it. Maybe part of him feels like he does not deserve that much grace from her. But here is the thing. When you take ownership, when you show empathy, when you offer reassurance, and when you make room for the other person's pain, you are participating in repair. And when repair is genuine, you do deserve healing in return. That does not erase what happened. It does not mean the hurt did not matter. But it does mean that when someone faces themselves honestly and responds with care, healing can be felt on both sides. And I think that is what we are seeing here. Aniya gives Casey grace, and then Casey is able to give her grace in return by wishing her well, even if that means she may find happiness with someone else. Well, that's a wrap for today. Make sure to come back next week, where I will have part 2, and I will talk about movie night exposure of Zach and Kenzie. And I'll also talk about Kenzie being exposed and how she responds to Dylan, and how Dylan responds in return. See you then.